The chilling exorcism of Anneliese Michel. The story of Anneliese Michel is one of the most harrowing and controversial cases of modern times, blending faith, psychology, and the supernatural in a way that continues to captivate and disturb. Born in 1952 in Leibelfing, West Germany, Anneliese was a devout Catholic who grew up in a traditional household. But what began as a seemingly ordinary life spiraled into a nightmarish ordeal that would become the subject of international headlines, court trials, and even Hollywood films. In 1976, at just 23 years old, Anneliese Michel died after enduring a grueling series of exorcisms. Her story involved nearly 70 exorcism sessions over 10 months, during which she exhibited disturbing behaviors that her family and priests believed were signs of demonic possession. Yet medical professionals argued that her symptoms were consistent with severe mental illness, including epilepsy and psychosis. The debate over whether she was possessed or gravely ill has never been fully resolved, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions and ethical dilemmas. The case of Anneliese Michel raises profound questions about the intersections of faith, science, and human suffering. Was Anneliese a victim of possession, as her family and priests firmly believed? Or was she failed by a medical system that could not adequately address her condition? The ensuing trial of her parents and the priests who performed the exorcisms brought these questions to the forefront, sparking global discussions about the nature of belief and the responsibility of caregivers. Her tragic story transcends its era, serving as a cautionary tale about the dangers of dogma, the limits of science, and the mysterious realms of human experience. As we delve into this haunting case, we explore the chilling events that led to her death, the investigation and trial that followed, and the enduring mysteries that keep her story alive today. Prepare yourself for a tale that will challenge your understanding of faith and reason, and leave you questioning the true nature of evil. Background story: the life of Anneliese Michel and the origins of her ordeal. Anneliese Michel was born on September 21st, 1952, in the small Bavarian town of Leibelfing, West Germany. Raised in a devout Roman Catholic family, her upbringing was deeply rooted in religious tradition. Her parents, Anna and Joseph Michel, were strict and pious, instilling in Anneliese and her three sisters the values of faith, discipline, and moral conduct. The family was known for their active participation in church life, with Anneliese attending Mass regularly and demonstrating a sincere commitment to her faith from an early age. Early life and personality. By all accounts, Anneliese was a bright and cheerful child. She was well-liked among her peers, excelling in school and showing a particular talent for languages and music. Her deep faith set her apart from others her age. She often expressed a desire to dedicate her life to God, potentially as a teacher or missionary. However, this sense of devotion would later intertwine tragically with the events that defined her life. Despite her devout upbringing, Anneliese's family life was not without its challenges. Her mother, Anna, carried a profound sense of guilt over the birth of Anneliese's elder sister, Martha, who was conceived out of wedlock, a social and moral scandal at the time. This guilt was compounded by Martha's early death at the age of 8 due to kidney failure. Anna's sense of sin and penance for her past often permeated the household, contributing to the family's deeply religious and austere environment. The first signs of trouble. In 1968, at the age of 16, Anneliese experienced her first unexplained health crisis. One day she suddenly collapsed at school, later describing the sensation as if her body were being controlled by an external force. Shortly after, she began experiencing intense seizures, which were later diagnosed as temporal lobe epilepsy. This form of epilepsy can cause a range of symptoms, including hallucinations, altered perceptions, and a sense of detachment from reality. Anneliese was prescribed anticonvulsant medications, including Dilantin, to manage her condition. Despite this treatment, her seizures persisted, and her health began to deteriorate. Over the following years, she underwent extensive medical examinations, including EEG scans, but doctors found no underlying physical cause for her seizures beyond the epilepsy diagnosis. The escalation of symptoms. As her condition progressed, Anneliese began to report disturbing experiences that went beyond typical epileptic symptoms. She described seeing demonic faces during her daily prayers and hearing voices commanding her to do terrible things. She also claimed to feel an overwhelming, malevolent presence around her, especially when she was near religious objects or places. Crosses and holy water, which once brought her comfort, now provoked a visceral sense of fear and repulsion. These symptoms deeply alarmed her family, who initially sought further medical help. However, as medical treatments failed to alleviate her condition, Anneliese and her family began to believe that her affliction was not merely physical or psychological, but spiritual in nature. This belief was reinforced when Anneliese reportedly expressed an aversion to entering churches and began to destroy sacred objects, behaviors that were profoundly out of character for the devout young woman. Turning to religion for answers. By 1973, Anneliese's mental and physical state had deteriorated significantly. She became withdrawn and depressive, with her symptoms becoming increasingly severe. Her once joyful demeanor was replaced by intense bouts of aggression, self-harm, and deep despair. Convinced that medical science could no longer help, Anneliese and her family turned to the church for answers. They sought out priests and clergy, hoping for guidance and spiritual intervention. While some priests advised continued medical treatment, others agreed with the family's growing belief that Anneliese was suffering from demonic possession. This diagnosis was not uncommon in deeply religious communities at the time, where unexplainable phenomena were often attributed to spiritual causes. A life defined by suffering. Throughout this period, Anneliese maintained a diary, documenting her struggles and spiritual reflections. These writings reveal a young woman tormented by her condition, but still striving to find meaning and redemption in her suffering. She expressed feelings of guilt and unworthiness, often describing her affliction as a form of divine punishment or a test of faith. Anneliese's belief in her possession was not without precedent. Her family and local priests cited her aversion to religious symbols, her unexplainable strength during violent outbursts, and her reported ability to understand languages she had never studied, an alleged hallmark of possession. These signs, combined with the failure of medical interventions, solidified their conviction that Anneliese's condition required an exorcism rather than conventional treatment. Requesting an exorcism. In 1975, the family approached Father Arnold Renz and Father Ernst Alt, two priests known for their work with exorcisms. Initially hesitant, the priests conducted their own observations and eventually became convinced that Anneliese was indeed possessed. After obtaining permission from the Bishop of Würzburg, they began the formal process of exorcism under the Ritual Romanum, the traditional Catholic rite for casting out demons. Thus began a harrowing journey that would last for nearly a year and involve countless exorcism sessions. These rituals, often grueling and physically demanding, sought to confront and expel the entities believed to inhabit Anneliese's body, setting the stage for tragedy. As Anneliese endured the grueling sessions, her physical health worsened. She refused food and water, claiming that the spirits inside her would not allow her to eat. Her frail body grew weaker with each passing day, but her family and priests remained steadfast in their belief that the exorcism was the only solution. By the time of her death on July 1st, 1976, Anneliese weighed just 68 pounds. Her official cause of death was malnutrition and dehydration, but the circumstances surrounding her demise would spark one of the most controversial and high-profile legal cases in modern history. The incident, the harrowing exorcisms of Anneliese Michel. The story of Anneliese Michel's tragic death is intricately tied to a series of exorcisms that span nearly 10 months. In the months leading up to her death, Anneliese's condition deteriorated at an alarming rate, and her family, now convinced that her suffering was the result of demonic possession, sought the intervention of priests. Their faith in the supernatural led to a harrowing chain of events that would culminate in a tragic, controversial death. By 1975, Anneliese's mental and physical health had severely deteriorated. She had stopped responding to medical treatments, including her epilepsy medication. Her seizures persisted, but more disturbingly, her behavior had become erratic and violent. Her family and those around her began to observe signs they believed were consistent with demonic possession. She claimed to hear voices, spoke in languages she had never learned, and displayed an intense aversion to religious symbols. As her condition worsened, Anneliese herself reportedly started believing she was possessed. She showed an increasing rejection of food, particularly bread, which she described as the flesh of Christ, and refused to enter places of worship. The culmination of these disturbing behaviors led her family to seek help from the Catholic Church. In 1975, after much persistence, they received the approval of Father Arnold Renz and Father Ernst Alt, two priests who were willing to perform the ritual of exorcism. Father Renz, after an initial assessment, was convinced that Anneliese was indeed possessed. Both priests began performing regular exorcism rituals in the hopes of purging the demons they believed were inside her. The exorcism sessions begin. Anneliese's exorcism rituals began in the fall of 1975, and for nearly 10 months they were conducted intensively. During these sessions, the priests believed that they were battling not just one, but multiple demons. According to them, Anneliese's body and mind had been overtaken by a host of entities, including demons named Cain, Judas, Lucifer, and others who allegedly taunted her in her weakened state. The rituals were grueling and physically exhausting. Anneliese was reportedly strapped down during some sessions, while others involved her being held and verbally confronted by the priests. The exorcists would shout prayers, recite incantations, and command the demons to leave her body. Anneliese's response to these rituals was alarming. She would scream, curse, and sometimes spit or foam at the mouth. Witnesses reported that she displayed extraordinary strength, even when restrained, and was able to speak in guttural voices, allegedly in the language of the demons. Her behaviors during these exorcism sessions were harrowing. She would reportedly contort her body in unnatural ways, exhibiting physical strength far beyond what could be expected from someone in her condition. At one point, it was said that she lifted a chair, something that seemed impossible considering her weakened and emaciated state. She also displayed signs of self-harm, hitting herself, scratching, and biting, all while supposedly under the influence of the malevolent forces inside her. Her physical deterioration continued unabated as the exorcisms progressed, yet the priests believed the worst was yet to come, and that only through persistence could the demons be expelled. Anneliese's physical and mental deterioration. As the months went by, the intensity of the exorcisms grew. Anneliese's body was subjected to both physical and emotional trauma, which would leave her frail, exhausted, and unable to properly care for herself. She reportedly refused to eat, claiming that the demons prevented her from consuming food. Her family, believing her refusal to eat was due to the possession, did not intervene, opting instead to allow the exorcisms to continue in the hopes of freeing her from the malevolent spirits. By early 1976, Anneliese had become gravely ill. Her weight had plummeted to a mere 68 pounds, about 30 kilograms, a state of extreme malnutrition and dehydration. Despite this, she continued to refuse food, and her body weakened to the point where she could no longer move or speak coherently. Her condition was deteriorating rapidly, yet the priests continued their sessions, convinced that they were fighting a spiritual battle, not realizing the physical toll the process was taking on her. Her mother, Anna, later recalled that Anneliese's eyes had become sunken and vacant, as if she were not present in her own body. Her once bright demeanor was gone, replaced by a look of terror and exhaustion. As the days passed, Anneliese reportedly began to lose her sense of identity, often speaking incoherently and calling out for help, yet never fully able to break free from the grip of the demons the priests believed she was possessed by. A desperate struggle. By the time July 1st, 1976 came around, Anneliese's health had reached a critical stage. She could no longer walk and had become completely emaciated. Her body had begun to shut down from a lack of nutrition and hydration, and her organs were failing. Her family, still deeply entrenched in their belief that she was possessed, did not call for medical help, instead continuing to rely on the exorcisms as their sole means of saving her. On that fateful day, Anneliese died in her sleep. Her official cause of death was later determined to be malnutrition and dehydration, both of which were a direct result of her refusal to eat in the prolonged exorcism sessions. She had been unable to provide her body with the essential nutrients it needed to survive, and the trauma inflicted during the exorcisms had overwhelmed her fragile system. Her death was devastating for her family, but they still believed that her suffering was part of a divine plan, that she had died as a martyr for the church. However, the priest and her family would soon find themselves at the center of a legal investigation that would call into question the ethics and legality of the exorcisms performed on Anneliese. A public outcry. The circumstances surrounding Anneliese's death quickly attracted attention when it became known that she had died after months of exorcisms. The German public, still in shock over the bizarre and extreme nature of the exorcisms, demanded an investigation. The case led to a criminal trial against her parents, Anna and Joseph Michel, as well as the two priests, Father Renz and Father Alt. The investigation revealed the full extent of Anneliese's suffering during the exorcisms, and the public was horrified to learn how her family and the priests had allowed her to endure such torment without seeking professional medical assistance. Despite this, both the priests and Anneliese's parents maintained that they had acted in good faith, believing they were saving her soul from eternal damnation. The trial that followed was one of the most controversial legal battles in Germany's history. In the end, both the priests and the Michel family were convicted of negligent homicide, but were not sentenced to long prison terms. The legal system found that, although they did not have the intent to harm Anneliese, their actions and neglect ultimately led to her death. The incident of Anneliese Michel's exorcism remains an unsettling reminder of the dangers of blind faith and the complexities of mental health, particularly in a time when psychiatric care was not as widely accepted or understood. Anneliese's tragic story has haunted the public imagination for decades, leading to numerous documentaries, books, and films about her life and death. Her case raises critical ethical questions about the responsibilities of those who care for vulnerable individuals, the role of religion in mental health care, and the complex intersection of faith, psychology, and human suffering. To this day, the mystery of Anneliese's death persists, and her story remains a chilling example of how fear, belief, and ignorance can intersect in the most devastating of ways. The investigation. After Anneliese Michel's tragic death on July 1st, 1976, the investigation into her death began, quickly revealing the shocking and controversial circumstances surrounding her prolonged exorcism sessions. The inquiry into Anneliese's death focused on whether her parents and the priests who had performed the exorcisms had acted with criminal negligence. The case raised questions about the responsibility of religious authorities, the dangers of faith-based healing, and the failure of medical professionals to intervene in time. The discovery of the tragic death, Anneliese's body was discovered in her bedroom at her family's home in Labelfing, Germany. She had died in her sleep, and her condition had worsened to the point where her weight had dropped to an alarming 68 pounds, approximately 30 kilograms. Her body showed clear signs of malnutrition, dehydration, and the physical toll of the prolonged exorcism sessions. Despite being under constant observation during the exorcisms, no one had sought medical intervention or proper care for her deteriorating health. The investigation began with an autopsy, which revealed the physical causes of her death. The pathologist determined that Anneliese's death was due to malnutrition and dehydration, both of which were the direct results of her refusal to eat and the severe physical strain she had endured throughout the exorcisms. While the cause of death was clear, the question remained as to why Anneliese had not received medical help and how the exorcisms had been allowed to continue for such an extended period, even as her condition worsened. The role of the police and authorities. Once the authorities were alerted to Anneliese's death, the police launched a formal investigation. They began by interviewing the Michel family, including Anneliese's mother, Anna Michel, and her father, Joseph Michel, who had both actively participated in the decision to seek out the exorcism. The police also interviewed the priests, Father Arnold Renz and Father Ernst Alt, who had been responsible for performing the exorcisms. The police were initially skeptical of the religious motivations behind the exorcisms. The nature of the investigation grew more complex as the detectives interviewed witnesses, examined the details of the exorcism sessions, and sought the involvement of medical professionals to assess how such a tragedy could have unfolded. The police were particularly concerned with the lack of medical care for Anneliese, especially considering her obvious physical decline. It became clear that the family and the priests had neglected to seek professional medical help during her ordeal, relying solely on religious rituals and their faith-based belief that exorcisms would cure her. This sparked an ethical and legal dilemma. While the priests and the family believed they were saving Anneliese's soul, they had ignored the basic medical needs of her body. The role of the Catholic Church. A significant portion of the investigation centered around the role of the Catholic Church and its involvement in the exorcism. The two priests, Father Arnold Renz and Father Ernst Alt, were both experienced in performing exorcisms. They were interviewed by the police and explained their rationale for conducting the rituals. Both priests claimed that they had received permission from the Bishop of Würzburg, and they believed that Anneliese was indeed possessed by multiple demons. Father Renz and Father Alt believed that her refusal to eat and her physical decline were signs of demonic oppression, and they argued that their exorcisms were the only means of saving her soul. Despite their justification for the exorcisms, the priests were criticized for continuing the ritualistic procedures even as Anneliese's health deteriorated. The question arose as to whether the priests had been too entrenched in their faith, failing to see the warning signs of a medical emergency. Their role in Anneliese's death became one of the focal points of the investigation, especially as they had not called for a doctor or medical intervention during the months of exorcism. The legal trial and public outcry. In the months following Anneliese's death, the public was outraged by the circumstances surrounding the case. People were horrified that a young woman had died as a result of what they saw as an archaic and misguided ritual. The investigation led to a criminal trial in which Anneliese's parents, Anna and Joseph Michel, along with Father Renz and Father Alt, were charged with negligent homicide. The trial became a media sensation, with intense public scrutiny on the role of religious authorities in Anneliese's death. While the defense argued that the exorcisms had been conducted out of a genuine belief that Anneliese was possessed, the prosecution emphasized that the failure to seek medical care and the physical and mental abuse inflicted during the exorcisms directly contributed to Anneliese's demise. The court case was drawn out, with the defense team arguing that the priests in the Michel family had acted in good faith and believed they were fulfilling a religious duty. However, the prosecution argued that their negligence in seeking medical intervention had caused Anneliese's death. Ultimately, in 1978, the court ruled that both priests and the Michel family were guilty of negligent homicide. The priests were sentenced to 6 years in prison, though their sentences were later reduced to 3 years on appeal. Anneliese's parents were also convicted, but received suspended sentences due to their deeply held religious beliefs. Theories and speculations. The unsolved mystery of Anneliese Michel's death. The tragic death of Anneliese Michel sparked numerous theories and speculations, with many trying to unravel the complex circumstances surrounding her passing. Was Anneliese truly possessed by demons, as claimed by her family and the priests who performed the exorcisms? Or was there something more grounded, perhaps a mental health crisis that was tragically mishandled? The theories surrounding her case delve into psychological, religious, and medical aspects, making it a deeply complex and controversial case that continues to provoke debate today. 1. The possession theory. The dominant theory put forth by Anneliese's family and the two priests involved in the exorcism was that Anneliese was indeed possessed by multiple demons. The priests, Father Arnold Renz and Father Ernst Alt, were experienced in performing exorcisms, and both believed that Anneliese's physical and psychological symptoms could only be explained by demonic possession. According to them, Anneliese had been possessed by at least 6 demons, including Nero, Cain, and Hitler, with Anneliese reportedly speaking in strange, guttural voices, exhibiting superhuman strength, and having fits of violent outbursts during the exorcisms. From the perspective of the priests, these symptoms were signs of a supernatural battle for Anneliese's soul. The priests and her family felt certain that she needed exorcism and that medical intervention, such as psychiatric care, was not only unnecessary, but could have made the situation worse by disrupting the spiritual battle. However, the possession theory was quickly contested by outsiders, including medical professionals, who saw her suffering as something far more mundane and preventable. 2. The medical and psychological explanation. Another key theory, one supported by many medical professionals, focused on mental illness as the underlying cause of Anneliese's behavior. Anneliese had been diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy, a condition that can cause hallucinations, seizures, and extreme mood swings. She had also experienced psychosis in the months leading up to her death, with symptoms that mirrored those of people suffering from severe psychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder. Anneliese's severe depression and delusions are often interpreted through a medical lens. During the exorcisms, she exhibited behavior typical of someone in the throes of a psychotic breakdown, such as muttering in strange voices and exhibiting violent outbursts. These symptoms could have been attributed to her underlying epileptic condition, or perhaps to schizophrenia or another psychotic disorder, both of which could have been exacerbated by her deeply ingrained religious beliefs. Additionally, Anneliese's refusal to eat and her rapid physical decline, culminating in severe malnutrition and dehydration, were symptoms of her deteriorating mental health. It is widely believed that if she had received psychiatric care or medical attention, her condition could have been managed and the exorcisms halted in time to save her life. However, the failure to seek medical care in favor of religious interventions was a critical misstep in her treatment. The medical theory suggests that the combination of epilepsy, mental health issues, and extreme religious fervor led to a dangerous downward spiral. Anneliese may have been suffering from psychosis in her family, believing that only the exorcism could help her, failed to recognize her need for proper medical attention. Doctors who later reviewed the case were horrified by the family's neglect, highlighting that had Anneliese received treatment for her medical issues, she might have survived. 3. The psychosocial stressor theory. Another layer to the theories around Anneliese's case involves psychosocial stress, the impact of growing up in a strict Catholic household, coupled with an overwhelming sense of guilt. Anneliese's devoutly religious upbringing created a belief system where spiritual warfare was seen as the root cause of many personal struggles. She was taught that suffering and guilt were part of the path to salvation, leading to a profound psychological burden that may have triggered her mental health issues. According to this theory, religious guilt played a significant role in her mental deterioration. Anneliese reportedly felt guilty about the sins she had committed as a teenager, such as sexual experimentation and watching sinful movies, which were deeply taboo in her religious environment. This intense self-recrimination and fear of eternal damnation may have triggered or exacerbated her psychological issues, leading her to believe that she was being punished by God and possessed by demons. The stress from these deeply held beliefs likely contributed to her psychotic symptoms, including her altered states of consciousness and extreme physical behavior during the exorcisms. Her desperation for redemption and the perceived need to purge herself of her guilt made her particularly vulnerable to the influence of the priests, who were convinced that exorcisms were the only solution to her suffering. Conclusion: the case of Anneliese Michel remains one of the most tragic and controversial events in the intersection of faith and mental health. The 23-year-old German woman's death, following months of intense exorcisms, has left the world with a haunting series of questions that have yet to be answered. Was she truly possessed by demons, as her family and the two priests believed? Or was her suffering a result of untreated mental illness and psychosis, compounded by the dangers of religious zealotry and a refusal to seek medical intervention? At the heart of this case is the deeply ingrained religious belief that her condition was spiritual rather than psychological. Anneliese, raised in a devout Catholic household, had a history of epileptic seizures and a diagnosed psychiatric disorder, but it was the religious influence that ultimately shaped her fate. The priest, convinced of her demonic possession, performed nearly 67 exorcisms over 10 months. During this time, her body wasted away, she became emaciated, and she suffered from severe dehydration and malnutrition. Yet her family and the priests continued to believe she was under the influence of evil spirits. The core of the tragedy lies in the failure to recognize the signs of a medical emergency. As Anneliese's health deteriorated, the exorcisms became more brutal, with the priests and her family neglecting the need for proper medical attention. The mental health perspective, which posits that Anneliese's condition was likely exacerbated by epilepsy and psychosis, suggests that if she had been given medical care, she might have survived. The possibility that spiritual belief took precedence over medical treatment is what makes this case especially disturbing and controversial. The legal ramifications were also profound. The priests, Father Renz and Father Alt, and Anneliese's parents were convicted of negligent homicide. They were sentenced to 6 years in prison, but served only a fraction of that time, raising questions about the ethical responsibility of religious figures when it comes to the health and well-being of their congregants. As we look back at Anneliese's case, we are confronted with several lingering questions. Was she truly possessed, or was this a tragic case of medical neglect? Could more have been done to intervene, or was the belief in possession so powerful that it blinded those around her to the more likely explanation? And perhaps most importantly, what does this case teach us about the fine line between faith and medical science? This tragic story also serves as a warning. The dangers of blind faith, especially when it overrides the advice of medical professionals, can be far-reaching and deadly. And as we continue to explore the mysteries of the unknown, we invite you to join us for the next episode, where we unravel another unsolved case, one that will leave you questioning the very fabric of reality itself.